This is an urgent audit briefing for the Chief Executive regarding a critical gap we've identified. It's a gap between the Trust's stated values, what's on paper, and the operational reality. We're calling it the SCAR accountability gap, and it represents a significant breakdown in the promise made to patients.
So here's our plan. We'll start with the standard the Trust set for itself. That's the SCARF commitment. Then, we'll pinpoint the accountability gap we found. After that, we'll analyze what we're calling the institutional black hole and the really bizarre reflection paradox that sits at the center of all this. And finally, we'll lay out our recommendation.
Okay, so first things first. To really get what went wrong, you have to understand the benchmark we're using. And that benchmark is the Trust's very own SCARF framework. Think of it as their public promise to be safe, compassionate, accountable, reflective, and fair. This is the yardstick we're using for this entire audit.
Let's start with compassion. The framework is crystal clear. We create a climate of openness, free from fear, blame, and shame. That's a huge promise. It means people should feel safe, right? They should feel they can speak up without being punished. I want you to hold on to that phrase, free from fear, because it becomes absolutely central to what happened next.
Then we have accountability. The idea is pretty straightforward. When we make a mistake, we put our hands up. And crucially, the goal isn't to point fingers or assign blame. It's about learning. It's about growing. It's about creating a culture where admitting a mistake is seen as a strength, not a weakness.
And that leads us right into reflection. Now pay close attention to the language here. The framework says we should ask what has happened instead of who is responsible. That is such a critical shift. It's supposed to take the focus off of blaming a person and put it onto fixing a broken process. It's designed to be constructive. And this, right here, is the key. The Chief Executive's own words from the staff charter explicitly ask people to call out behaviors that don't match these promises. It's literally an instruction, a mandate for this kind of accountability. So when a patient did exactly that, you'd think the system would work as designed, but it didn't.
And this is where the chasm opens up. On one side, you have these incredible, well-intentioned promises from the SCAR framework. But on the other side, well, you have what actually happened. A documented, clear-cut deviation from that standard.
Just look at this timeline. From August to November, a patient is repeatedly raising concerns about communication. On December 22nd, the Trust formally admits it in writing, saying communication has not always been as effective as it should be. Now, you'd think that admission would be the start of a resolution, right? Wrong. It was the beginning of nothing. Total silence.
We're calling that period of silence the institutional black hole. It's this vacuum that formed right after the admission of failure. And it's inside this void that the principles of SCARF didn't just bend, they completely shattered.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about a couple of days of a delayed reply. We're talking about more than 20 days, 20+ days of complete radio silence from every level. Imagine, you admit you messed up, and then you just ghost the person you said it to. It's unbelievable.
And this silence wasn't just rude. It was a direct violation of their own rulebook. Compassion? Gone. They created a communication black hole. Accountability? It just vanished. There was zero corrective action after they admitted the failure. And respect? That went out the window when staff accused the patient of having a passive-aggressive tone, but flat-out refused to provide a single piece of evidence.
But here's where this story goes from being about simple failure to something much, much stranger. The Trust didn't just ignore its own principles, it actually twisted one of them and used it as a weapon against the patient. We've identified this as the reflection paradox.
So what is the reflection paradox? It's an impossible situation. The Trust demands that the patient be reflective about their tone. But when the patient says, "Okay, I'm happy to reflect. Can you show me the specific examples of my language you're concerned about?" the Trust refuses. It's a perfect catch-22. They're demanding something while making it impossible to do.
You can see the deadlock right here. On one side, the Trust makes a demand. You must reflect. On the other, the Trust withholds the very evidence needed to do that reflection. It creates a massive power imbalance and traps the patient in a loop of pure frustration.
And look, this isn't just our analysis. This is a direct quote from the patient's correspondence back in November. They literally offered to reflect and apologize, but couldn't because of the failure to provide examples. This proves the paradox was a real, documented experience, not just a theoretical one. So what do you do when a system isn't just broken, but is actively working against its own purpose?
The failure here is so systemic that the only possible fix has to come from the very top.
Which leads us to the fundamental question this whole audit boils down to. When the very framework that's supposed to guarantee accountability completely fails, where does that accountability lie now? If the process itself is the problem, responsibility has to escalate.
Let me be blunt. What our audit found is a critical breach of the trust's own promises of being safe, compassionate, and accountable. The system has not only failed, it has created a paradoxical trap. Because of this, our only recommendation can be immediate and direct executive intervention. This is a powerful lesson that values on a poster mean absolutely nothing without the leadership to back them up.